Ed Karr, thanks so much for coming back on Wall Street Unplugged.
Frank, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me again.
Well, I want to start out with Bitcoin because I've had you on since 2017. You're an investor in our CEO token. You're very familiar with this industry. And just to bring everyone here for Ed, to June 2017 when I interviewed him, he said, and this is when Bitcoin was at 3,000. He said, demand's now stronger than ever. Recent volumes are proving to be a massive hedge against potential macroeconomic events. And then in early 2019, when I interviewed you, said, one thing I can guarantee to you and your subscribers, Frank, is that blockchain technology that's here to stay. It's going to revolutionize our lives probably the way that the internet did originally in the 90s. We're looking at Bitcoin getting close to all-time highs again for over 55,000. What are your thoughts now? I mean, what an amazing call. But, I mean, is this just hysteria? You think it's going a lot higher? We're seeing more institutional adoption. I want to get your thoughts as someone who's been covering this industry for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank. And certainly a lot of interest in Bitcoin these days. Man, when I put on CNBC, they've now got the Bitcoin ticker and like the GameStop ticker, running in full time live stream. So it just shows all the interest in it. And certainly we've had this incredible move. You look at Bitcoin today at 56,000, I think 200 this morning. Incredible from the last time we spoke. I'll tell you, my general thought process is this move has been spectacular, but also justified. And I think what we're really seeing is the institutionalization of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and especially Bitcoin. So as we see more institutions, more banks, more Fortune 500 companies start to get involved, Wall Street, et cetera. And don't forget, back when we had originally talked, Frank, 2017 or so, people were thinking, oh, Bitcoin is just the Silk Road, money launderers, criminals, like sort of
Tulip mania.
Yeah, tulip mania, exactly. And then we've gone from 3,000 to 56,000. So it's been an incredible run. But I do believe this is validation of the big institutions coming in now.
So what do you think now? Because it seemed there's an interesting stat out there that I saw. I think it was yesterday on one of the. I think it might have been Cointelegraph. I forgot what site it was, saying that there's more accounts that have that spent over $100,000 on Bitcoin in the past few weeks, and this is when prices. I wouldn't say crash right in this because a crash isn't really like a 15, 20% move in Bitcoin, which happens in weeks. But when it went down to, below 40, 47, 45, a lot of people started adding. And it wasn't, those individual investors, right? Where these are young kids that understand Bitcoin, it's digital, and this is the wave of the future. This was institutional buying. And like you said, you're seeing it. Does that mean that it seems like with the adoption and every time this thing goes down, people are buying and more companies are using their cash balances to do it. Do you see this going significantly higher from here, or will you be more inclined to take profits? I mean, the crazy bulls are just like, buy, it's going to 100. If it goes to 100, they're going to say it's going to go to 300,000. But I'm just curious, like, so from someone that's in it early like you, would you be just taking some profits here, or you think it's going to go a lot higher?
Look, I tell you, as you know, Frank, I've been doing this for a while. Mm-hmm. So my kind of spidey sense, my trader in me, says the short-term big money has been made. We get something that goes from 3,000 to 56,000. That's a big move. And a lot of people bought in Bitcoin, 5 to 10,000. Let's say you even bought it at 10,000. It's at 56, so you made 5x your money. Is Bitcoin now going to go to 250,000? I mean, it certainly could. It certainly could. But I don't think the march from 56,000 here to 250,000 is going to be a straight up hockey stick. I really don't. I think it's going to take time. And we see it, whether it's a stock, a commodity, a cryptocurrency, they tend to have these big, massive rallies and spikes, and then they cool off. There might be institutions that come in and short this market via the futures. I think we need to consolidate for a while. And there are some significant risks, Frank, to the whole Bitcoin infrastructure out there. And I think the biggest risk that everyone has to be aware of is government. If the U.S. government comes out, especially under the Biden administration, they just decide tomorrow to classify Bitcoin as a security, I mean, it could lose 50% overnight. You'd have to have FINRA-regulated broker-dealers clearing the trades, and that's a major risk. That really is. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the government, the Federal Reserve, the regulators, I don't think they're going to let this thing just, stay out there. Once you start approaching trillion-dollar market caps and become a little competition to the global financial system, that's when the government tends to step in and give you a little, slap on the cheek.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's going to be interesting to see how this is, regulated going forward. And that leads us to the Coinbase IPO, I think, is going to be a game changer, right? Because it forced them to really, I think it was 2018 or 17, where I think it was 10, 20% of their accounts. Don't quote me on that. But they didn't have, they just, whatever. They didn't have all the proper checks. They were probably most of them were okay. But they basically got rid of it and said you have to go through the AML KFC process because they knew they were going to go public. Now we're looking at something that could go 80 billion, 100 billion valuation, which is insane because that would make it a bigger market cap than every major exchange in the U.S., their market caps combined, which is insane. But what's the next step here? Because you mentioned the word security. You know about security tokens. You invested in our token. You're seeing, NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens. I mean, what's the next stage of this? Because I think you were talking Bitcoin when nobody's talking Bitcoin. The whole world's talking Bitcoin. Like you said, you're up, 20x on it or whatever. What's the next step here? And what are you looking at in how this develops? Or is it just, hey, Ethereum and 2.0? Is that something? I mean, what's your view on other things outside of Bitcoin? Because that just like the internet, I mean, social media didn't come to a good 10, 12 years after, right? Really? I mean, and then it blew. You just see these different industries get developed and created. And again, we had more high-speed internet. But I think you know where I'm going with this. What's the next step, you think, in this Bitcoin revolution?
Look, I've always been extremely impressed, enthusiastic with blockchain and the technology behind the blockchain. The architecture of that is going to change the world, in my opinion, more than the .com and the internet, revolution. Mm-hmm. And so probably just like the .com shakeout we had in the late 90s, there'll be a couple companies left standing. So you'll probably have Bitcoin, Ethereum, but there are thousands of alt cryptocurrencies that are going in the dustbin, and they will all be zeros. So you'll have a couple left, but blockchain is definitely here to stay. And the revolutionary implications when you look at this to change society, things we can put on the blockchain from regular banking. I mean, I live, Frank, in Europe, and if I wanted to send you money on a Sunday night at 3:00 in the morning, and it's my money, private transaction to you, why shouldn't I be able to do that? The world is currently right now hostage to the global banking SWIFT system. So it's only 9 to 5, and these international money center banks, they do a wire transfer, they sit on the float, they take interest off you, me, and the little guys for 3-4 days, and they make billions and trillions of dollars. I think blockchain will change all that. I think blockchain will trade the commodity trading industry that is very, very paper heavy and archaic and deals with, bills of lading. And when you look at supplies of physical commodities, rice, copper, gold, whatever, blockchain will change all that. I think blockchain will change the identification industry, driver's license, passports, medical records. It's all going on the blockchain. It's going to be incredible. And they will tokenize and securitize everything in the next decades.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing where it was just 2-3 years ago, and even for people who went in 5 years ago, and just seeing, the crash in 2018, for this to come back and getting it right. I think the crypto world and Wall Street are getting it. They're starting to get together in order. I think that needs to happen in order for this thing. And obviously, that's really what's driving this, right? Institutions, but you need a little bit of regulation, like with Coinbase. You need to know that your account is safe. I understand, decentralized, DApps, everything, but, you need to make sure that everything is safe. And I think now that Coinbase is coming out with that and people, it's very easy to buy Bitcoin today than it ever was. It just adds to that, to the possibility that this thing is really, really going to scale much more than it already has. I guess the last question on this would be, is there anything that you're invested in terms of tokens, outside of if it's Bitcoin or, again, I know you have our CEO token, but is there anything else that interests you, or it's kind of, hey, I'm a Bitcoin guy?
No, absolutely. And I look at a lot of different projects and securities and tokens, and it's very, very interesting. And I'm constantly on the lookout for different opportunities and still very enthusiastic of this whole sector. And I think, Frank, your listeners, all of us, we have to look like, why are cryptocurrencies running so much? Well, it's a macro discussion. Why are SPACs so popular right now, and why is so much cash flowing into SPACs? Well, I tell you what, the Biden administration and Congress just passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus. And that money has not even flowed into the U.S. economy yet. Probably next week or the week after, people will start getting their stimulus checks. And then this amount of money is unprecedented. The amount of money that Congress, the Federal Reserve is spending to combat, this COVID global pandemic, it's unprecedented. So we are awash globally in this tsunami of liquidity. And it is going into speculative assets. So real estate's going up, the stock market's going up. You'll get stocks like GameStop and, Tesla that just go crazy. You have Bitcoin that goes crazy because ultimately, in my humble opinion, Frank, these are all inflationary forces. The global money supply is increasing. We're seeing even, lumber going up, some of the agricultural commodities going up. We're seeing copper, on a hell of a bull run. Everything is in a bull market, and it's all due to liquidity. So it's an unprecedented time in human history.
Now, here's the $64,000 question. So inflation creeping higher the past few months, right? We're all aware interest rates they've gone higher. And the interesting thing for me is we're seeing Bitcoin near all-time highs. So maybe you could say it's a hedge against inflation. But you have gold selling off here. Talk about gold. I mean, is it this Bitcoin really taking the place of gold? Maybe if it's a store of value. And again, if you talk to, the gold bugs are going to say, that's not a store of value, But still, there are people that, and especially the younger generation, when it comes to, hey, you know what? I want to own something outside of, those assets that you just mentioned, whatever, even if it's collectibles or stocks or real estate, And if they have a choice between gold and Bitcoin, the younger generation is definitely picking Bitcoin right now. Is that taking the luster away from gold, or is this creating a great opportunity for gold?
Well, I personally, I've always thought that they are mutually compatible, and investors and speculators should own both. For me, gold is my insurance policy. So I want to have gold. I want to have physical. I also own, the GLD and a lot of exposure to gold. Bitcoin for me is much more of a speculative, fun trading vehicle. Who knows if it's going to be around in 10 or 20 years? We really don't know. Not only is government a big risk to Bitcoin, look at quantum computing coming in the future and these evolutions in computing power. If China cracks the quantum computing before the United States, with quantum computer, you could literally hack a blockchain in like a nanosecond. So they could go in and steal everyone's Bitcoin, and everyone who thinks it's secure, good luck. Or maybe Google gets the first quantum computer. I don't know. But that's going to be a game changer as well. So your quantum computer is not going to hack my gold coins. I guarantee you that, And you're absolutely right, Frank. Gold has been languishing, and we have to look and think why. And, they're very, very different groups. The millennials love to speculate with their smartphones and their Robinhood accounts and get in there and buy some cryptos and put $10, $20. Wow. And look at my gain. Wonderful. Who are the big buyers of gold? Central banks around the world. They are the big buyers. They're not out buying Bitcoin. They're buying the 12.5 kilo central bank bars. And, there's countries like China, like Russia, Middle East that are just hoovering up the gold supply at these lower levels. And gold tends to make a seasonal low around now, actually, Frank. It tends to sell off February to early March, then kind of base. You got the big Canadian mining conference going on right now, the PBAC. And, usually coming out of that, gold tends to go on a nice little run into the summer. So I think gold is an incredible buy right here, especially due to the fact, you saw some of these Reddit traders kind of want to get behind silver and, light that up a little bit. And silver had a nice little pop. Nothing's happened yet with gold. So gold's an incredible buy right here when you look at it value-wise to compare to everything else. At $1,715 an ounce, where we are today, I tell you myself, I'm going to take a couple of my Bitcoin profits and I'm going to start just deploying those into gold because I think the relative value of gold is much higher. And remember, Frank, on the podcast back in whatever it was, 2017, I said, and I still believe that at some point, gold has the potential to trade like Bitcoin. I think we can get a massive speculative blow off in gold. And what will really precipitate that will be the fear factor. If people believe that ultimately, with all of this, quantitative easing and money printing from the Fed, from Congress, if ultimately people start to lose faith in the US dollar, and especially international investors, and they start dumping the dollar and the dollar declines, it could set off a cataclysmic global reaction like Zimbabwe, like Venezuela, leading to a currency meltdown. That's when you would just see money pour into gold because people would be scared. They would want to maintain their purchasing power parity. And we could see $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 gold very, very quickly.
No, that's interesting. And we talked a lot about Bitcoin, and it's a good segue into gold here. But with Bitcoin and cryptos, that's kind of like a side thing for you. For U.S. gold, let's talk about U.S. gold. So this is a company that you've been a part of for a very, very long time. You acquired the Copper King asset a while ago. Why don't you bring us in of the Copper King asset, U.S. gold? What makes this asset so special? Because this is something that I'm invested in personally, and I'm invested long term because I saw this project personally. But why don't you talk a little bit about that and bring everybody in here on U.S. gold?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Frank, and thanks for that. And when you look at the company, U.S. Gold Corp, certainly the project is important, Copper King, but probably the most important thing, in my opinion, for companies is you got to look at the people. Because projects are great, but if you don't have the people and the management to move those projects forward or that technology forward, you're not getting anywhere. And that's why companies like, Tesla get a premium valuation because of Elon Musk. So when you look at U.S. Gold Corp, last August, we appointed George B. as our president CEO. And George, you've met him, Frank, an incredible guy. And what we've got in George B. that I think is still underappreciated, we have the Tom Brady of mining. Tom Brady's a winner. You're down in Florida. He goes down to Tampa Bay there and bang, ends up winning the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And that's like George B. George B. is a winner. This is a guy who has been in the mining industry for 40 years. He spent 16 years with Barrick Gold as a senior executive, brought some of the biggest projects, biggest mines on this planet into production. He was the mine manager for Gold Strike in Nevada. That's the mine that made Barrick. And so George was living the good life in Park City, Utah, sitting there in semi-retirement, enjoying the powder skiing. And when we actually introduced him to our CK Gold project in Wyoming as a consultant, he fell in love with it, Frank. And he said, wow, guys, this is a project whose time has come. I know with my experience and my background and skill set, I can push this thing forward. And this is a big money maker for these shareholders. And that's when George came all in. And, this is basically going to be his swan song. He's in his early 60s. He knows that he can push this project forward into production, and we are extremely excited with the progress we've made so far.
Yeah, and I've met George personally, and I said this to you afterwards, where he was the one person or the one geologist / engineer that I met, and I've been on tons of projects, over the past 15 years, where he didn't say how great the project, like, this is a great project. He was like, this is what we need to do to develop. We're going to do this, and this. And remember, early stage, a lot of people with junior miners, they don't look to develop. They just, which I think puts you guys in an incredible position, because a lot of them are just, hey, let's just, stick a couple things in the ground, see what the asset's all about. And then, the goal is to sell to somebody else. With this, he's like, I'm developing this. And that's not saying that you can't get a takeover or get acquired at a higher price. And he's going to do its best interest of shareholders for you guys. But, I love the fact that that's the goal here, is we're developing this thing. Now, George could have worked any place, and he could have stayed retired forever. So that was one of the things that really attracted to me. This is why I went out there to go see this project in Wyoming. Talk a little bit more about the recent news, because you just came out with news, and that's why I wanted to have you on today a couple days ago, which is fantastic, and something that I felt like just by seeing the project myself and seeing the gold right on top of the surface and the copper. But the news that came out, talk about the news that came out, and I believe it was just a couple days ago.
Yeah, so this is game changing, and we are moving the Copper King project right now. As you know, Frank, we have a preliminary economic assessment. was done in the past by Mine Development Associates. We're moving the project right now to what's called a pre-feasibility study. So we're doing a bunch of drilling, a bunch of geological work, reports, et cetera, to move this project forward. And on Monday, 2 days ago, March 8th, we put out a press release on metallurgy. And metallurgy is huge. This is game changing for us. And I don't want to get too technical, but basically what the press release showed is that the top of this deposit of Copper King has a oxide zone that comes up to surface. That oxide zone has some of the highest grades in the deposit. We put out some press releases back in December talking about those high grade intercepts. I mean, these are snazzy intercepts. And so the metallurgy that was done in the past, the group that did it, SGS out of Canada, they had pretty poor recoveries out of that top oxidized zone recoveries for copper and gold. In fact, on the copper, they were only getting about a 10% recovery. So our recent work, not only do we have George B. as our president and CEO, Frank, we have all of George's experience, Rolodex, and relationships of people and consultants he has worked with for 30 or 40 years. So one of our head metallurgists, John Wells, has been working with Kappas Cassidy out of Reno, and KCA did the recent metallurgical testing. And we have now optimized the recoveries, and we've gotten the recovery of copper in that top oxidized zone up to 60%. So from 10% to 60%, Frank, that's a 500% increase in the recoveries. You know, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And those economics are going to flow right to the bottom line. Important to point out, too, this is some of the very first material. It is the first material that will go to the mill. So this deposit, you were out there, Frank. You stood right on top of that. You saw those copper rocks, you know, filled with copper and gold. It comes right up to surface. So when we put this into production in the future, that material, like literally the first shovels in the ground, when that material goes to the mill, we will be producing revenues and cash flow from day one. So this project becomes highly profitable. A lot of deposits, they might be 100 or 200 feet underground. So you have to do what's called pre-stripping. You have to take all that overburden off before you get to the actual mineralized material. At Copper King, we are at mineralized material right away. We're in the highest grade, you know, payday material right away. So it means our payback is going to be very, very quick. And we've now increased the recoveries in copper by 500% and gold increased by 27%. So these are going to be super exciting. I think the economics on the PFS are going to be very, very robust. And as we release that, we believe we're still on track for about mid-June this year to have this PFS document come out. This is the catalyst, Frank. This is what the institutions, the real big boys, will start looking at. And I think right after this PFS comes out, our stock, our company will re-rate. You know, you look at our competition, they are trading at significant multiples higher than us with similar assets. So we've got a real opportunity here to create a lot of shareholder value.
Hey guys, just to bring you in here too, that the pre-feasibility study too, it's, you know, I've had companies come to me and they tell you, you know, based on their own estimates, and they might get an independent study just showing, you know, this has 2 million ounces and these are the grades. For institutions, they need to see the economic study. They really need to see that. And once that, because it's a stamp approval, it's done independent, and that put the economics on the project, where now you could have analysts cover it and it gets throughout the industry like, holy cow, you just see these results. And that's, you said that's coming out. And I have your presentation up now just to show that this is from 2012, guys, valuing the project at 178. Again, you just came out with news showing that it's a much better project, higher gold grades, even more copper, but it's pricing gold at $1,275, right? And gold is $1,750 today. You're looking at copper price $280. They're around $4, almost 50% higher, a little bit more than that. So, and yet this is 180 million. And then you have on the next page where you guys, if you said, hey, we just use, a little bit lower, you still have 280 copper here, but you have it at 321 million is before these results. And your market cap is at 70 million. That's something that attracted me where, here's a catalyst that's coming up. It's going to probably be pretty good based on the news you already reported. They're underestimating the potential here, but I guess that the biggest question is you're sitting on a great asset. It's in a mine-friendly district. You have the right people involved. Everything's perfect. What about, the gold industry itself? I mean, because we know it doesn't even matter. I always used to think the most important thing for any gold company is people. But yet I know a ton of projects with great because on it. And we had like a 5-year stretch where nothing in gold worked and everything crashed. Didn't matter who you were. So do you need gold prices to go higher here? Because if they stay the same, this seems like this is a layup where this thing's going to skyrocket higher once you come out with that study. Or, are people going to say, I don't know, I just want to stay away from gold altogether and come down and, this thing could come down as gold prices come down. But how dependent is this on gold prices? I mean, you have it where, you can produce this at very, very, cheap gold prices and copper prices. But how important is that? Because I think that's the biggest risk. I mean, you have the project, you have the company. I feel like nobody really knows about this. But if the gold industry stays the way it is, or we see it pushed down to $1,600 an ounce, I don't think it's going to matter for any gold company, right? Everything's probably just going to sell off.
Yeah, I think that's a good point and observation, Frank. And certainly a increasing bullion price, increasing copper price will help us in the entire industry longer term. And I am very bullish. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, the gold fund managers and the sophisticated specialists in this sector are a very small percentage of the overall investment universe. So most people are generalists. And when you look at money managers or hedge fund managers, institutions, big guys like CalPERS, even retail, very few people actually specialize in gold and exploration and mining stocks. So as long as, the market is ripping, then your growth stocks are hitting new highs, your blue chips are doing exceedingly well, you'll probably just have a small portion of overall investment capital allocated towards this sector. I think if the market were to sell off a little, we'd see tremendous inflows in here. And at some point we will. We're already starting to see now this rotation in the market. With interest rates increasing, people are starting to rotate. They look at these hyper growth stocks as very long duration that can get hit in a rising interest rate environment. And you look out there today, Frank, and people look, where's the relative value? Do I go out and do I buy stocks that are very, very extended, whether it's a Zoom or a Netflix or a Tesla, or do I look at relative value maybe from the mining sector? And I look at a company specifically like US Gold Corp with a $70 million market cap, no debt, $15 million in cash on the balance sheet, so a $55 million enterprise value. We've got an asset in Wyoming with a potential $321 million NPV or higher, and 2 projects in Nevada and a project in Idaho that alone could all be company makers. So I think that, the interest in this sector will come. And there's a lot of companies in the mining world that are highly profitable at $1,700 gold. And I'll tell you, as I talked about, Frank, with this liquidity tsunami, I just do not believe gold is going to stay here at 1,700. I think we're going to end this year with a 2-handle price on gold. We'll be above $2,000 by the end of the year.
Yeah, no, and it's tough. It's a tough question, right? Because eventually when I look at gold, I'm bullish on gold. I have a lot of money invested in gold in my portfolio. But, in the Bitcoin craze, people think it's either or. You're one of the guys, just like me, just like Frank Holmes, who I had on a couple of weeks ago. You could buy both, and they make sense for the current environment where, everyone's spending money like crazy. But, I have a chart of your stock up here. I mean, it's pulled back along with most gold stocks, but after the news right here, you see it, it went higher. But everything's in place here. I love the excitement for you guys. I love the fact George B is there. You guys got a great management team. And Ed, you've been a friend for a long time. Again, it means a lot that you invested in a company. And love having you on because we can go anywhere, right? When Bitcoin, gold, you get everything, right, with you. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Really, really great stuff. And you're always welcome, man.
Frank, I really appreciate that. And just from the bottom of my heart and everyone at the company, we really appreciate your support. All of your kind comments and just, the support you've been there. You've really believed in us and the entire team, and that means a lot to us too. We want to make this work for everyone out there, for you personally, all your listeners. Management and insiders of this company, as you know, are significant shareholders. We're not just paycheck collectors. Got a lot of our own money in this deal, and we want to make it work.
No, that's great. That's great. So, Ed, as always, again, always an open invitation for you, and hopefully you join us again soon.
Appreciate it, Frank. All the best.
All right, buddy.